For the weekend at Orange County, we've had a wonderful 2 days with Dr. Mark Unno, our guest speaker for today. We had a seminar yesterday, and we had O-Higan service today. And yesterday, before we started our seminar, we always start with a short sutra chanting of the Juseige. And Dr. Unno said, if you'd like, I'd like to do a little explanation of how I see the meaning of sutra chanting. And it was really wonderful. So I had him share it again with our Sangha at the O-Higan service this morning, and I'd like him to share it with all of you. So he's going to kind of explain a little bit, and then he's going to lead us in the chanting of the Juseige. And then following that, he'll give his dharma message. So Dr. Mark Unno has been teaching at the University of Oregon, my alma mater. Go Ducks! Oregon. He's associate professor there in the religious studies department. Prior to that, he taught at Carleton College in Minnesota. He's 14th generation Shin Buddhist minister, 14 generations. And his father, that many of you may be familiar with, Dr. Taitetsu Unno, taught at Smith College for many years, was also an ordained minister and spoke extensively at our BCA temples all over during his lifetime. He was really a pioneer in introducing Shin Buddhism to the academic world and to the general community. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Mark Unno.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Let me just open by just thanking Reverend Marvin Harada and Vista Temple and all of you for inviting me to your O-Higan service. I don't know if any of you were there, but it was almost like 30 years ago, maybe it was like 27 years ago, where we had an IBS retreat here when Reverend Art Takemoto was still here. And we used your facilities here at Vista Temple to hold our retreat. And I was part of that experience. And we just had such a wonderful, wonderful experience that I was so happy when Reverend Harada invited me to be with all of you here today. Just want to say a few words about chanting. So, one of the ways that we speak about our tradition is to say that it's really, Shin Buddhism is the path of Nembutsu. And what's really significant about understanding it's the path of Nembutsu is it's something that we live. And all the studying that we do, we might read some books. Reverend Harada generously mentioned my father's writings. We might hear ministers speak. We might study ideas, teachings, doctrines. And that's all well and fine, but that's not the end. Those are means for us to live our lives. And in our case, living our lives really means living our lives on the path of Shin Buddhism, on the Nembutsu path. That is to say, it has to come alive. The teachings have to come alive in our lives. And so to engage a path doesn't mean just intellectual study, intellectual learning, but involves our whole being, body, heart, and mind. And one of the places that we are able to do that on the path of Nembutsu is chanting. So it's wonderful that we have this chanting, which in some ways is a fuller experience of the Nembutsu path than simply reading or discussing or even hearing about the teachings. Now, some temples chant primarily in the Japanese and some in English, or some a little bit more in English and some in Japanese. Ultimately, it doesn't matter what language it is. But generally speaking, for example, chanting the Juseige, we do it in Japanese. And it's really, really old Japanese. It's so old, in fact, even the Japanese can't understand it. Okay, so don't worry about it. If you can't understand the meaning of Japanese, then why do we do it? Why do we chant in this old Japanese? Well, there's meaning to the Juseige, and there's translations of it that's available to you all. But the real significance of all of the chanting is to realize the real substance of the Nembutsu path, or the Nembutsu way. And the real substance of it, the depth of the path, is ultimately beyond words. The story I like to tell is to say, recently we had this solar eclipse, and unfortunately I was not in Oregon because it came right near where we live in Oregon, and then also because the satellite, Cassini, just completed its 20-year journey of studying and taking photographs of Saturn. They just crashed into Saturn because it just ran out of fuel. So I've just been thinking about that. And one of the things that comes to mind is, I think it was 30, 40 years ago, Pluto was a planet, but it got demoted into mere interstellar fragment because it wasn't big enough and its orbit wasn't close enough and regular enough. So this is not really quite a planet. About 20 years ago, the astronomers had a change of heart. They said, well, no, we reconsider, because after all, it does, have its orbit around the sun, and it may be somewhat irregular, but still, it's not just like a meteor fragment or something that disappears. No, it's not like a comet that goes way out of the solar system and comes back. It's really part of, this solar system. So we can't quite say it's a legitimate planet, but it's kind of like a planet junior. Let me ask you something. Does Pluto care? I don't think so. Okay. And this is another example, a typical example of our overreach with what we think is the power of human language and the human intellect. Somebody discovered it and made up the name Pluto for that particular thing, right? But ultimately, the truth of the universe, we can't capture it in words. Words are only around as long as human beings. There have been tens of millions of species that have come and gone on the face of the earth, and our time also will have come and gone, and we may even be hastening the demise of our species with all the stuff that we're doing to the planet. So our time, after all, will not be that long on this planet. And after language is gone, there's not going to be Pluto. The chimpanzees are not going to be calling it Pluto. Dogs and cats are not going to be calling it Pluto. Cockroaches much there. So, so the important thing here is that reality, as it is beyond, but also before human language. And it's only, so language is wonderful. It has all kinds of uses, but language follows reality. We experience something, beautiful color red, and somebody comes up with the word red. Somebody sees a beautiful flower and gives it a name, chrysanthemum or lily or tulip. Language follows reality. But our human habit is then to try to force reality to follow language. We start thinking, I know what is real and what's not, and I know what I'm going to do tomorrow, and I can plan, and I can move this microphone. And yes, I can move this microphone, but it's kind of an illusion because most of reality is beyond control. I can't decide when I was born. I can't decide when I'm going to die. So the deepest truth of reality is beyond words. And the simplest way to understand that is to say it's a oneness. Because in oneness, there's no separation caused by our use of categories and our attempt to pigeonhole reality into different boxes and different categories. So the ultimate meaning of the Buddhist path is to realize the deepest truth of our existence, which is the deep flow of the oneness of reality beyond words. And so ultimately, every single syllable that we chant, whether we chant in English or in Japanese, is to realize just this oneness. And chanting is just a beautiful, beautiful opportunity to really live the path by bringing not just our minds, but body, heart, and mind onto the Buddhist path. Because chanting is something we do with our whole being. And in my case, I always chant in the old Japanese. And the reason is, I study, in my case, and it's different for each person, but in my case, I studied Buddhism in Japan. And my great, great teachers who lived Buddhism expressed this deep oneness in Japanese. I received the experience of this deep flow of the oneness of reality in the old Japanese. So I don't think about the meaning of the syllables as we're chanting. I just want to become the chanting. My father, that Reverend Dr. generously referred to, used to love to quote a poem by the famous poet T.S. Eliot, which goes like this. Music heard so deeply, it is not heard at all. And you are the music while the music lasts. Music heard so deeply, it is not heard at all. And you are the music while the music lasts. The beauty of the chanting is just to become the chanting and to feel the rhythm of this deep flow of oneness, which is our true reality deep, deep within. So I hope that you will join in with me to receive this experience, wonderful, beautiful experience of feeling the deep reverberation, the deep rhythms of the flow of the oneness of reality. We begin with a moment of silence. Just completely relax your shoulders and just breathe naturally. And just allow yourselves to completely relax, to go deep, deep into that quiet place where we are in touch with the oneness beyond words. Just go deep within to that quiet place in the world of the deep flow of the oneness of reality. Gasho. And bow deeply and stay at the bottom of the bow. And up.